through this afternoon. That'll mainly be restricted to the Western Isles, perhaps parts of the Highlands, and it will feel a little bit cooler here with a bit of a breeze. But in the sunshine, highs of 21 degrees are expected this afternoon. So a similar feel to yesterday. Through this evening, that rain will continue to persist across the far northwest, turning heavy at times, but it will remain restricted to the north of Scotland. Elsewhere, it should stay dry overnight, but again, we could see some mist and fog starting to develop. Some drizzly rain is also possible over parts of the Pennines and southern Scotland. Should be another fairly mild night, despite any clearer skies. So a bright start for many areas of the UK on Thursday, perhaps some mist and fog that will be fairly quick to clear, and it's going to be another dry, bright and sunny day on Thursday. However, across the far northwest of Scotland, still skies will remain cloudier. Rain should start to ease, though, as you head towards the afternoon, with some brightness developing here as well. But in the sunshine, highs of 22 or 23 degrees, so rather warm with high UV levels.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M77 in East Renfrewshire, there's a lane closed northbound just after junction 4 at Newton Mearns, where someone's broken down, causing queues. It's widespread disruption to a number of train services in England today because of industrial action, with no service on a number of routes. On the M62 in Cheshire, the inside lane's closed eastbound after an accident between junctions 10 and 11 off the M6, with queues from junction 8 west of Warrington. The M40 in Warwickshire's closed northbound from junction 12 at Gavin to 14 at Leamington after an accident, with long delays as you divert. On the A1M in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed southbound where there's an accident just after junction 8 at Stevenage, causing queues. On the M32 heading north out of Bristol, there's a lane closed after an accident between junctions 3 and 2. And people arriving into UK airports this morning may experience delays at border control after technical problems last night. Outbound passengers, though, shouldn't be affected. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams. It's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently, it's been made by organic fruits growing in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it, I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her product. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So hang on, why did they go?
Has gone through the roof.
Why did they go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying we don't want your jam. We're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth style, New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess, so she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with a cooking show as well on Netflix. She's coming out with a cooking show. And she's, I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking. But I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So, are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist? Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
Morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 9th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So Prince Harry is back in Britain today, but his father, King Charles, is too busy to see him. What do you make of that?
And thousands stranded at airports across Britain last night as the e-gate system failed. Were you caught up in the chaos? We're talking to somebody who was.
And women are now welcome. The men-only Garrick Club in London voted to allow women to join their ranks after 139 years. And why would we want to?
And Reform UK leader Richard Tice joins us next to discuss his party's performance at the local elections. Did you vote for them?
And we've got an amazing story this morning in the papers about allergies, particularly in children, food allergies. So many kids have got them now. You might have children or grandchildren who have them, peanut allergies. Well, there's been remarkable results in one study. So we're going to be telling you all about that as well.
Yeah.
You're excited about Harry being here, aren't you, Andrew?
I think the King's quite right not to see him. Why would you? Wouldn't trust him at the word he says.
I am making this a Harry positivity zone this morning. He's here for the Invictus Games. We have to applaud that. Some might say it's the one good thing he's done well. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories. Social media companies are being warned that they could be banned for those under 18 if they don't keep children safe. The media regulator Ofcom says platforms must take action to stop their algorithms recommending harmful content to children. Its draft Children's Safety Codes of Practice sets out how it expects some of the world's biggest online platforms to protect children online and penalties for companies who fail to comply. 2/3 of NHS trusts are missing their target to treat patients within 18 weeks of referral. That's according to analysis by Labour. The party says that 114 trusts out of 167 have failed to meet the target in any month since December 2019. Trusts are meant to ensure that 92% of patients are treated within 18 weeks of GP referral. Most trusts also fail to meet targets, ensuring that most patients wait less than 4 hours in A&E departments. The sentence of Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacane will be reviewed by the Court of Appeal over concerns it may have been unduly lenient. Calacane was given an indefinite hospital order for the manslaughter of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Coomer and Ian Coates last June. The 32-year-old's pleas were accepted by prosecutors in January after medical evidence showed he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. The Attorney-General's office is expected to argue that he should instead be given a hybrid order, which would see him treated in hospital before being transferred to a regular prison. And rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today due to ongoing strikes by train drivers, making it the longest ever dispute in the rail industry. Members of ASLEF are walking out, affecting services across England, Wales and Scotland. The few services that are running will start later and finish earlier than usual. ASLEF says its members haven't had a pay rise in 5 years and accuses the government of giving up trying to resolve the dispute. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning that QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. It's 9:35. Now then, I think the fact that Prince Harry is here to celebrate 10 years of Invictus Games, a wonderful event, a brilliant project it is. And I think we have to give him some credit on a day like this.
Yeah, he's going to a service at St Paul's Cathedral later, 5 o'clock actually, so we'll be there for that. But
Will you be there for that?
Well, I won't be there for that. I'm not invited. But interesting, there'll be no member of the royal family there, my understanding. But significantly, Harry arrived yesterday. We think he's probably going either later today or tomorrow. The King has no time to see him. Why is that? It's because the King doesn't trust his son.
Do we know that Harry wanted to see him, though?
Yeah, he put a statement out yesterday saying that he wouldn't be seeing his father and that he'd hoped to see him, but his father's schedule of events was too busy. He was 3 miles from the King yesterday at one point, and the King is seeing he's got engagements today. He's seeing the Prime Minister, for instance, the weekly audience. But you can always find 10 minutes, half an hour.
Poor Harry.
Well, why do you say poor Harry? Harry wrote the book called Spare, which dumped bucket loads on his family. They took part in that documentary with Oprah Winfrey, which dumped bucket loads on the royal family. All for money, Bev.
Yeah.
All for money. You reap what you sow.
I know, but look, his dad's got cancer. His sister-in-law's got cancer. If there is ever a time to let that stuff go and move forward, this has got to be it, hasn't it?
Some people might argue that the stress caused by Harry's behaviour may have, I'm not saying caused cancer, but it won't have helped the King's health. He's a man of 75.
And you know what doesn't help health as well? Is not forgiving people. That's worse for your health. There was a story in the paper, we did it earlier in the week, didn't we, about the fact that if you can't forgive and move on, that will make you ill. Isn't this King Charles just being a little bit petulant? We know he can be a bit childish and a bit sulky, can't he? Maybe he's got to be the adult here, hasn't he? And say to his son, come on then, come and see me, come and have a cup of tea at the palace.
They met before for half an hour. What we don't know is, did something that went on between those two men get leaked?
Maybe. Well, who knows? Well, look...
Because we don't know what we don't know is what the King's cancer. We don't know what it is. And can you have a proper conversation with your son and not talk about the cancer? I suspect he feels he can't.
What a shame. Well, royal biographer Ingrid Stewart joins us now to reflect on this a little more. Ingrid, you've heard us talking about it now. What do you make of this, and how might it play out between the two of them?
Well, I actually agree with both of you, annoyingly, but I do remember, and I have to go back because Andrew likes me to talk about what has happened before. I remember Diana telling me once that she could not get an appointment with the Queen. This is the Queen, head of state, our late Queen. So what she used to do, because the Queen's diary literally had appointments every 20 minutes and there was hardly a gap between them. So what Diana used to do, because she wanted to see the Queen and have a little moan at her about her life, she used to go into the Pages vestibule next door to the Queen's private sitting rooms, and she would wait in there until the visitor that was with the Queen left, and then she would run in, and literally run in, as only Diana could. Now, unless Harry is prepared to do that, I do understand that his father, who as monarch, not as the Prince of Wales, his father, but father as monarch, has very, very little time to himself. And he's obviously very busy today. I believe he's going to a garden party. He's got his meeting with the Prime Minister. And in between that, he's got the business of being monarch. So I think we can't blame Charles. And also Charles probably feels that anything he says to Harry will be repeated, like Harry has already repeated the fact that his father's too busy to see him. Now, that's not a very kind thing to say. So, but we don't know what's gone on the telephone. We don't know what's gone on maybe on email. Maybe they've been in constant touch. We don't know. And unless Harry chooses to tell us, we will never know.
It's also quite interesting that King Charles doesn't really care what the public think about him not seeing Harry. You know, if he was concerned about public perception, then he would have made time to see him. Perhaps. What does it tell us about how King Charles wants us to view that relationship?
Well, King Charles won't play to the audience. He won't play to us, the media, and he won't play to the public. In particular, in this Harry situation, it's obviously very delicate. I don't believe for 1 minute that Charles has cut Harry out of his life or not forgiven him, because he's a very religious man, and religion is all about forgiveness. I think he has forgiven him. I think he's probably very wary of seeing him, but I don't think it's because he's cut Harry out of his life.
Ingrid, we don't know because the King doesn't discuss these things, but there must be a big issue over trust.
I think there's a huge issue over trust. As I said, Harry's already told us that his father's too busy to see him, which isn't a very nice thing to say, better left unsaid. He could have said, unfortunately, we've both got back-to-back appointments and it's not going to work this time, but I'll see him soon. I'll be going up to Scotland in the summer, spend some quality time with him. One of the other, that all the royal children say they never really saw their mother at all, except up at Balmoral.
And Harry put that, and it was quite interesting because Harry's office put that statement out yesterday, Ingrid, didn't it, saying just that, that Harry hoped to see his father, but his father's diary didn't allow it.
Absolutely, but if Harry had said, got them to word it a little differently, he could have said he'd hoped to see his father, but unfortunately they were both too busy. Would have been a rather kinder sort of remark. Don't you agree with that?
Do you see this ever? Can this ever be fixed?
I think everything can be fixed if you want it to. But the longer they leave it, the more awkward it's going to get and the more time you're going to need to mend it. So I feel that, well, I think it can be fixed and I think it will be fixed, but I don't think it'll be fixed right now.
No. All right, thank you.
I'm just going to say, but nobody's even mentioned William, Ingrid, because there was obviously not even a prospect of a meeting with his big brother.
No, that's right.
Absolutely. But the thing that does actually surprise me is that Harry hasn't seen Kate, because he was very, very close to Kate. I know he's insulted her, but she seems to me like a very level-headed, forgiving sort of lady. And I mean, maybe he has. Maybe he's staying down near Windsor. Maybe he's staying at Coworth Park, where he stayed before. And he could be seeing her completely without anyone knowing. That we won't know, because Kate will make him say, please, 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 don't say to anyone.
OK. All right, thank you, Ingrid.
It's a lot of don't knows and a lot of guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. But 10 years of the Invictus Games, and that, I think, is reason to applaud him at least a little bit.
Just to remind you, that's why he's here. There's a service today to mark 10 years. The Invictus Games are being held in Vancouver in February, and it is, of course, to help former servicemen and women who've been badly injured,
but can still compete in sport. Now, a nationwide issue is being called with e-gates at airports that caused major disruption. It's now been resolved, according to the Home Office. It said the system was back up and running and there was no indication of malicious cyber activity. This is what you get with facial recognition technology. That's what happened here. The facial recognition broke down. I kind of like that. We were looking at it online this morning, and there popped up the face of GB News director Sam Morter, who joins us now. Hi, Sam. So I turned on my phone this morning, and there you are telling the world about the chaos at the airport. How was it?
Well, it was just so frustrating. Just quickly, this is Hugo, by the way. He keeps barking, so I'm having to hold him. Otherwise, he'll keep barking all the time. Yeah, it was very chaotic. We just got back from a trip to Sri Lanka, so we've been flying for 11 hours, as had a lot of people had been flying for a long time. So a lot of passengers very grouchy and just want to go home. And then we got into the passport control area, and it was pandemonium. All of the screens were blank. None of them were working on the e-gates. So you could see Border Force officials frantically running around trying to alleviate some of the pressure from the amount of people coming in. And they suddenly got a load of Border Force officials to try and start manually processing UK passports. But I could only see about 5 people doing this for UK passports. And at the same time, you've got hundreds of people coming in from other flights, which just meant it was bedlam in there. There was no information being given. There was no tannoy announcement. There was no staff telling people what was going on. They did provide cans of water to people because they knew people were going to be queuing for a long time, but just a lot of angry, frustrated people, and a lot of because it was not the first time that this has happened. It's happened before, and they can't seem to get it right.
How long were you stuck for, Sam?
I was queuing for over an hour and a half, which isn't, as bad as what a lot of people had it. I think we landed just as the problem started, so I was relatively towards the front-ish of the queue, but I was still waiting over an hour and a half. The people coming in behind me, they would have had to have queued a lot longer. They actually stopped letting people into the passport control area at one point because it got to capacity.
OK, all right. Thank you so much, Sam. It's nice to see you on the other side of the camera for a change in front of it.
I know, it's weird. Thanks, guys.
And bye to Hugo as well. Thank you for joining us. Do you know what it was?
What a sweet dog Hugo
is. It was basically like, this is, we've all got the experience of the self-checkouts. We hate them in the supermarket, right? And the technology breaks
I never
down.
use them, ever. I always queue up.
Well, there will come a time when you literally can't shop because they're just normal now. They break down, they bring in a human being. This is what happens when you over-rely on technology.
I had a long weekend in Italy recently, just a few weeks ago, and they were breaking down. So you're in a queue, it broke.
Yeah.
You got into another queue, it broke. It was infuriating.
It is infuriating, but like I say, there's a little bit of me that sings inside when this technology breaks down, because we have to be cautious with it.
Where are the staff who used to man the booths? Where have they gone?
Well, they were all in bed and they had to get them up to come back and help out. But you're right, where have they gone? What are their jobs? Right, we're going to be talking in just a moment to the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, about his party's local election results. I know a lot of you will be interested in what he concludes about those results from last week. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Hamza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So we had the big local election results, and I tweeted this. Reform UK's 30,000 votes cost Andy Street the West Midlands mayoralty to a Labour candidate who scraped home by 1,500 votes. Be careful what you wish for. Here he is, Richard Tice. So your lot cost Andy Street the West Midlands.
Do you not believe in competition, Andrew? I mean, competition's a good thing, isn't it?
Hang on, you haven't let me finish. I think he was a good man. I think you probably agree.
No, I don't, actually.
Oh.
No, the reality is he was pro-HS2, which is a massive white elephant, cost the country tens of billions of pounds, OK? So, no, on that basis alone, he deserved to be fired. And, look, the reality is we believe in competition. So the Tories used to believe. Andy Street thinks the party needs to go to the left. Forget that. Why do you think it's doing so badly? Because it's a socialist party. It's just like the Labour Party.
But what do you know about the Labour guys? One now.
Look, I'm not pro any of them. Frankly, they're both awful. They're both forms of socialism.
Your mind only got 30,000 votes. Pathetic. Not even 3%.
But you're now complaining that we stop. Either you believe in competition, Andrew, or you don't. Let's move to Blackpool South, shall we?
3%.
Blackpool South, we got.
What do you get in London? What do you get in London?
We got a London Assembly member for the first time.
Right.
Okay, so and that's under proportional representation, which of course is a much better, fairer electoral system.
Well, you're never going to get
most
that.
nations, most nations in the Western world have that because it's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, we share first past the post with Belarus. Not great company, Andrew, is it? Let's be honest. So no, we're delighted with the results. First Assembly member, and Blackpool South, that was our highest ever. We got within 60 people of beating the Tories into third place. So it's happening whether you like it or not.
Turn out 30%.
That's right, and we'd love many more people to vote. But the reality is you deal with the situation in front of you. And we made great progress there. We're heading upwards. In the north,
UKIP got more votes at the same stage of the
after 20 years of trying.
Yeah.
We've been there 3 years.
Right.
In Sunderland, in Barnsley, we're now second to Labour.
The difference
so
is,
in the north,
the difference
hear me out. In the north, in the locals, we're now the party of opposition to Labour. The Tories are sinking. You may not like it, but the Tories are sinking, and we're surging.
The Tories deserve to sink because they've been useless. The point is they did so well, UKIP last time, Nigel Farage. If you'd had Nigel Farage on the ticket, much as I love you, Richard, you'd have done a lot better. You'd have done a lot better.
And it's very exciting because Nigel's got a big decision to make, hasn't he?
Well, why isn't he going to make it?
Well, time is ticking by.
Yeah.
He'll make a decision in due course. There's lots of opportunities.
Didn't see him rushing to embrace your results the other day.
Oh, I think he was thrilled with our results. But obviously he was in America, doing things in America. And
he's more interested
as you know, he's a very fine broadcaster, so he's our honorary president.
Which area were you disappointed in your performance? In which area in the country would you say, I thought we'd have done better there?
We're delighted everywhere because almost everywhere.
You can't be delighted everywhere.
Almost everywhere. Almost everywhere.
What about Howard Cox in London Mayor?
Yeah,
Howard. Disappointing.
Well, Howard got squeezed in the desperation to get rid of Sadiq Khan, which failed. But we're delighted we got an Assembly member, and I think in the locals we're within a whisker of our national polling average. All the media said we never did that. Well, we did. In Blackpool South, we beat it. So actually, no, we're making progress.
What happened in Hartlepool? This is where you're standing. What happened in Hartlepool? Labour crushing victory for Labour in Hartlepool. Yeah, what happened to reform in Hartlepool?
Because the Tories should have stood down and let us win the seats, but they didn't. You see, they're now splitting the vote because they're toxic.
Well, you're not standing down for the Tories, so why would they stand down for you?
Why should we stand down?
Well,
we're the party on the up.
We're the party on the up for you.
Because they failed. They betrayed the country. They've allowed mass immigration. They're pro-net zero. They're pro all the policies that are destroying our economy, killing our jobs, killing our communities like Port Talbot. They're on the way down.
If that was a general election, you'd have probably lost your deposit, Richard, in Hartlepool.
Nonsense.
How many of your councillors are going to be your candidates for MP?
Really good question. I'll have to come back to you on that.
No, I know. It's probably a bit of
I have lots of data in here.
Well,
that's not one of them.
Sorry, I don't expect to know the figure off the top of your head. But how many of them are now...
So we didn't stand...
enthused to go forward, and how many of them are demoralised?
Oh, I would say lots are enthused. So we stood about 300 councillors.
And you've got two
in the general.
How many councillors have you got now?
One of which was a Tory council.
How many councillors have you got now, Richard?
I'd have to check because we've had.
I think it's two.
No, nonsense. We've had lots of defections, and you wait before the general election. There'll be
how many
lots
did you
more
win
defections.
last week? It was two.
We won two from the Tories.
Two. There's a great result. They had two councillors they won last week.
Yeah, because we were a dodgy first past the post system.
And we've got 2 seconds. Richard Tass, always good to see you. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom. Here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It should be a dry day for most of us. There's a bit of a cloudier start across the east coast. That's because some clouds pulled in overnight. That should slowly start to burn back throughout this morning and into the afternoon. There could also be some cloudier skies across western coasts into this afternoon, but I think many inland areas will see some long-lived sunshine. It will feel quite warm in the sunshine. However, notice across northwestern areas of Scotland, we're starting to see some rain approach through this afternoon. That'll mainly be restricted to the Western Isles, perhaps parts of the Highlands, and it will feel a little bit cooler here with a bit of a breeze, but in the sunshine, highs of 21 degrees are expected this afternoon, so a similar feel to yesterday. Through this evening, that rain will continue to persist across the far northwest, turning heavy at times, but it will remain restricted to the north of Scotland. Elsewhere, it should stay dry overnight, but again, we could see some mist and fog starting to develop. Some drizzly rain is also possible over parts of the Pennines and southern Scotland. Should be another fairly mild night, despite any clearer skies. So a bright start for many areas of the UK on Thursday, perhaps some mist and fog that will be fairly quick to clear, and it's going to be another dry, bright and sunny day day on Thursday. However, across the far northwest of Scotland, still skies will remain cloudier. Rain should start to ease, though, as you head towards the afternoon, with some brightness developing here as well. But in the sunshine, highs of 22 or 23 degrees, so rather warm with high UV levels.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. There's widespread disruption to a number of train services in England today because of industrial action, with no service on some routes. The M40 in Warwickshire is closed northbound from junction 12 at Gaydon to 14 at Leamington after an accident. There are delays towards the closure and as you divert. Now in Northamptonshire, the A43 is partly blocked northbound by an accident south of Brackley, causing roughly 3 miles of queues. Southbound delays there too, past the scene. On the M32 heading north out of Bristol, there's a lane closed after an accident between junctions 3 and 2 from St Paul's to Eastville, causing queues. In Essex, the A121 is closed each way between Epping Forest and Waltham Abbey after an accident. And people arriving into UK airports this morning may experience delays at border control after a technical problem last night. Outbound passengers, though, shouldn't be affected. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say why not? It's what is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round. So why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 8th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pierce.
Well, he's back, Prince Harry, but his dad, the King, too busy to see him. Cameron Walker has the latest.
Yeah, diplomatic response from Prince Harry after he was snubbed by his father's busy diary. But as Buckingham Palace shifted the spotlight off of the Invictus Games and onto a rare joint engagement between the King and Prince William. More details shortly.
Nicer than the time the bells for us, wasn't it? Now, thousands of passengers were stranded at airports across Britain last night as the facial recognition e-gate system failed. Were you caught up in the chaos, and how frustrating are you finding these kind of technological meltdowns?
It's infuriating, isn't it? And women welcome. The men-only Garrick Club in London has voted to allow women to join their ranks after 193 years. Bev Turner is rushing to the door to see if they'll let her join.
And an independent review into the BBC, this is great, has told the broadcaster that it is not racist to air concerns about migration and that they must view the topic through, through a wider political lens.
And the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says pubs can extend their opening hours to 1 a.m. Goody two-shoes, isn't he? If England or Scotland make it to the Euro 2024 semi-finals this summer, how nice of him. I bumped into him last night.
James Cleverly?
Yeah, I bumped into him, and because I'd just been to the Garrick to see what had happened with the vote, and I told him about the vote and said what was his view, and he was all smiles because he thought this pub opening thing would be very popular. It's just like a crumb off the table, isn't it?
Ridiculous.
Oh, if they do well in the football, you can stay open late.
It's the patrician attitude. It's this sort of parental. If they do well, we'll let the pub stay open. Well, just let the pub stay open. Doesn't matter who's in the final. The British people are going to want to have a night out and watch it anyway.
Yeah, because they will watch it even if it's Belarus versus Croatia. I won't. Not interested.
Honestly.
But yeah, let the pub stay open because actually they're up against it and have been for years.
What are they thinking? Right, gbnews.com/your say. Tell us what they are thinking if you have any sort of ideas about that. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you, and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Social media companies are being warned that they could be banned for those under the age of 18 if they don't keep children safe. The media regulator Ofcom says platforms must take action to stop their algorithms recommending harmful content to children. Its draft Children's Safety Codes of Practice sets out how it expects some of the world's biggest online platforms to protect children online and penalties for companies who fail to comply. Security Secretary Claire Coutinho told GB News the UK aims to be the safest in the world.
When I was Children's Minister, I looked at wellbeing, and one of the things that I was really interested in was the link between how much time our children are spending online and their mental health. And for me, there was two things. It's what they could access, and I'm really pleased that we're doing the online safety legislation because that will tackle that part, but it's also what it's stopping them doing. So that's the things that I care about. I definitely welcome government's efforts to act on this and make sure that we're the safest place in the country when it comes to, in the world when it comes to being online for children.
2/3 of NHS trusts are missing their target to treat patients within 18 weeks of referral, according to analysis by Labour. The party says that 114 trusts out of 167 have failed to meet the target in any month since December 2019. Trusts are meant to ensure that 92% of patients are treated within 18 weeks of GP referral. Most trusts also failed to meet targets, ensuring that most patients wait less than 4 hours in A&E departments. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the government is failing to properly fund Britain's health service.
This is a consequence of 14 years of the Conservatives driving our NHS into the ground. So what's Labour's solution? We would introduce a proper tax on the very super wealthy non-DOMs, and we would use the proceeds from that to fund extra appointments, 2 million extra appointments a year in our NHS, so we can start driving those waiting times down. So that if you're waiting for a hip replacement or a knee replacement or a hernia perhaps, a cataract operation you need, you can get your operations on time. Too many people are waiting in pain and agony at the moment for an operation after 14 years of the Conservatives.
The sentence of Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacane will be reviewed by the Court of Appeal over concerns it may have been unduly lenient. Calacane was given an indefinite hospital order for the manslaughter of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Coomer and Ian Coates last June. The 32-year-old was found to have been suffering paranoid schizophrenia. The Attorney General's office is expected to argue that he should be given a hybrid order, seeing him treated in hospital before being transferred to prison. Rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today due to ongoing strikes by train drivers, making it the longest ever dispute in the rail industry. Members of ASLEF are walking out, affecting services across England, Wales and Scotland. The few services that are running will start later and finish earlier than usual. ASLEF says its members haven't had a pay rise in 5 years and it's accusing the government of giving up trying to resolve the dispute. John Swinney was sworn in as the new First Minister of Scotland at a ceremony in Edinburgh in the last hour. He told GB News that it's an enormous privilege.
It's an enormous honour to come to the Court of Session and to be sworn in a link to the history and the roots of our country, our democracy, and the rule of law. So for me, an enormous honour and a privilege to do that, and look forward very much to doing so. A big surprise for me and an enormous privilege. And as I said yesterday, I'm here to serve everyone in Scotland, and I look forward to doing so.
In the US, a judge has indefinitely postponed Donald Trump's trial over claims he illegally kept classified documents after leaving office. It had previously been scheduled to begin in just under 2 weeks' time. This decision has been made due to still unresolved issues in the case and because the former president's currently attending a separate trial over hush money allegations. Donald Trump denies all of the charges against him. And last drinks will come a little later this summer if England or Scotland make it to the Euro semi-finals. Venues will be allowed to stay open for an extra 2 hours on match days, pushing closing times to 1 a.m. if either or both teams reach the last four or the final. Most pubs shut by 11 p.m, but the law allows some ministers to relax licensing hours to mark occasions or exceptional national significance. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
The time is 10:07. You're with Andrew and Bev on Britain's Newsroom.
So people have been getting in touch. Paul says, Andrew, read the room. What have you lost?
The running order. So, don't know what's happening in this
Andrew,
programme.
read the room. Reform are the great hope for saving the UK, and Richard Tice is inspiring.
Look, my job is to challenge. I think reform are a breath of fresh air, and you need to keep the Tories on their toes. But we've got to challenge Richard Tice, and I don't think it was, despite what he said last week, a great result, particularly in Hartlepool. He'd have lost his deposit.
And Mick has got in touch and said, move on, you dinosaurs. That's you and me.
Right.
I suspect technology breakdowns are very rare. I don't suspect they're very rare.
Well, hang
I know
on.
they're very common. Just go into the supermarket.
Can I just tell you, as a dinosaur, who was that? Who sent that message?
That was Mick.
Mick, as a dinosaur, I was in just 2 weeks ago in Heathrow, and it was chaos. With the one after another, after another, after another, and people got more and more bad-tempered because you've been queuing, you almost got to the front of the queue, and it went out the machine. And they said it's happening all the time.
Get used to it, because this is what the future is morphing into.
And this didn't happen at one airport. This happened at 7.
Yeah.
So this chaos was replicated throughout the entire country.
I don't know what the solution is, because we can't be Luddites. We have to move forward. But we've done it without any sort of discussion about the pros and cons.
Have staff there as well.
It's pushing all the profit to the top of these corporations.
But when I go to the supermarket, deliberately, when they point me towards the checkout free. I don't. I queue up for the checkout.
Well, good for you. We have to do that as much.
I say to someone, why are you pushing me somewhere? You're putting somebody out of a job.
James, who's a GB News member, has said, well said, Andrew. Andy Street was a great mayor.
He was. Look, whether he was Tory or not, he was a good mayor, and we heard it from Nigel Nelson, no less, yesterday, who's no supporter of the Tory party, saying he was a good mayor, very technical. He was a businessman, he had proper experience, and I'm afraid the Labour mayor is a dud.
Yeah, and Rogers said, morning, it's time for Harry to learn some humility and get a life out of the public eye. It's no way to live trying to prove something to the public. A lot of you are giving me a kick-in for being a bit pro-Harry this morning.
Well, you're a mum, and I get that, so you'd always want families...
Forgiving.
Yeah, and I always think about my mum's favourite Christmas was when the family was together.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was all she thought about.
That's all my mum wants.
Yeah, always, always, if all the children were back.
Absolutely.
No matter what age we were. Even if we were under the same roof, we all saw each other. So I get that. Right. But I'm sorry, Harry has broken a bond of trust with his family, with his brother, with his sister-in-law and with his dad. And it's hard to fix it.
And on that note, Cameron Walker joins us now. Hi, Cameron. Our royal correspondent is in central London this morning. Right, Cameron, what's happening today? Why are we talking about Harry and his father today?
Well, Bev, it's because Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, will be at St Paul's Cathedral this afternoon, and he will want the focus very much to be on the Invictus Games, his Invictus Games, celebrating 10 years of supporting wounded veterans with their recovery through Paralympic-style competitions and subsequent support. But all the headlines this morning is that he is way, way his father is way too busy to see him. A spokesperson for Duke of Sussex yesterday told me that in response to the many inquiries and continued speculation on whether or not the Duke would meet his father while in the UK this week, it unfortunately will not be possible. Due to His Majesty's full programme, the Duke, of course, is understanding of his father's diary of commitment and various other priorities and hopes to see him soon. Now, I think this is an attempt by the Sussex camp to stamp out all of this speculation around a potential meeting, thus putting the focus back on the Invictus Games. But it's this line that really sticks out to me, and it's the one that says the Duke is, of course, understanding of his father's diary of commitments and various priorities, because it's very diplomatic, it's very warm and friendly. It reads like a royal press release, which is in complete contrast to a statement which perhaps we might have got from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex just a couple of years ago. If you remember back in 2021, where the late Queen stripped both him and Meghan of the honorary military titles and patronages, they released a statement saying that service is universal. Now, friends of the Sussexes said that that was in the context of their charity work, but many critics said that that was a very bitter statement and very disrespectful to the late Queen. Yesterday's statement, as I said, far more diplomatic, far more warm, which suggests to me that Prince Harry does genuinely want to try and build more of a relationship between his father and other members of the royal family here in the UK. Now, both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace are not commenting on anything to do with the Duke of Sussex. Neither Prince William or the King are expected to be in St Paul's Cathedral this afternoon. But there was the timing of a rare statement from Buckingham Palace yesterday announcing a rare joint engagement between Prince William and the King, scheduled for next week, was announced as Prince Harry touched down in the UK yesterday. Now, of course, this could just be coincidence, but perhaps the cynic in me would say that this is a bit of a show of unity between the King and his oldest son, while also at the same time his youngest son and the King seem to have perhaps strained their relations, because there doesn't seem to be 10 minutes in the King's diary to see him while he's in the UK. Now, Meghan is not in the UK either. She is in California. Both him and Meghan, Harry and Meghan, expected to fly to Nigeria later this month to do some cultural visits and Invictus visits too.
OK, thank you, Cameron. And as we say, Prince Harry will be arriving there this afternoon. You can watch it on GB News. But joining us now is former royal correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. I'm defending Harry for one day only, because I think Invictus Games is a fantastic initiative. He started it 10 years ago. Somebody did message our inbox saying it was his grandfather that made him do it to give his grandson something to do to keep him busy. Don't give him too much credit, Bev. But I think that's a bit harsh.
I think you're absolutely right, Beverly. On the subject of the Invictus Games, you cannot fault Harry and his commitment for those games. He's done brilliantly. And I think the comments about him being so good with those games, that's where it stops. After that, it's back to, you know, Harry is basically a Berg.
Harry is a what?
A Berg.
Well, well, I don't hear it very often, Charles. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we were talking to Ingrid Sue about it. There must be a trust issue here, Charles.
Oh, yeah, I listened to Ingrid, and she's absolutely right. I mean, the fact that it's the Sussex's office that put out the statement saying why he couldn't meet his dad. Now, we know he wanted to see his dad because he's over here, and the King has not got, as Cameron's just said, 5-10 minutes to see Harry. And that just shows you just how deep the rift is between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family. And it is an issue of trust. You cannot trust Harry. Certainly you cannot trust Meghan. There is no question about that. And I'm not surprised that the King is too busy. I'm sure he is busy. And you would have thought, though, that Harry would have sorted this out beforehand, you know, to say, I'm coming over. Is there any time that we could work it out? And it just goes to show how bad things are between them all.
That's Harry's problem, is it? Why does he have to press release everything, Charles? Because we were all wondering yesterday, is he going to see the King? But in my inbox comes a statement from Prince Harry's office saying, no, I wanted to see him, but my dad's too busy. In other words, implying that Charles doesn't really care enough to want to see his son.
And it's interesting as well, don't forget the significance of the announcement that Charles and William will be taking part in a ceremony next week for William to take over as Colonel-in-Chief of Harry's former Apache regiment, helicopter regiment. Now, they could have waited to announce that when Harry was on his way back to California on Thursday, but they didn't. They announced it yesterday on his arrival. So that just goes to show that they don't really care about Harry anymore. I'm sure the King loves Harry. I'm absolutely certain that there's no father who does not love his son, no matter what the son does. However, there are times you've got to sort of call a halt and say, you're overstepping the mark, and it's down to you now to sort it out. I think Harry wants to have a relationship again with the royal family. The way things have been going just the last few weeks, last couple of months, it looks as if he wants to get back again. But I'm not sure that the royal family, particularly William, are interested in any rapprochement.
And we know they saw each other for half an hour before when he was here last time. And you wonder, Charles, if something that happened between them or something then was leaked, which the King read and thought that can only have come from Harry.
Well, it could be that. It was only half an hour, and it wasn't that long. I think it was just, oh God, if Harry's here, we'll have to see him. It's that simple. Let's get him in for a few minutes, and that'll be it. But no, it's not going to happen. And one other thing I'd just like to say, Andrew and Bev, is that Harry and Meghan are going off to Nigeria quite soon. Now, Harry's spent quite a lot of time and a lot of money in this country going through the courts, telling us how dangerous Britain is. He's going to one of the most dangerous countries in the world, and the Foreign Office have still got their alerts in line to say, don't go to Nigeria. It's not safe. I mean, come on, Harry, get a grip.
OK, Charles, thank you so much. Charles Ray there.
I haven't heard a member of the royal family called a Burke for a very long time.
Much underused word, I think.
It's a good word.
And talking of Burkes, the BBC have been found in a review to be reporting immigration in a way that is not balanced. It's a fascinating report. It tells us what we already knew.
Well, they were
largely.
And on Brexit, the same.
But it's so nice to see it written down in paper.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you what they've been told.
Anybody who supported Brexit was a horrible racist. That
exactly.
was me. That was me.
This is all about the fact that the BBC have to reflect immigration as also sometimes being problematic to people in this country, and they don't do it enough. Don't go anywhere. This is
hugely problematic.
GBNews.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. It just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pensions Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Stop talking, it's 10:21. You're with
That was
Britain's
Mike
Newsroom
Parry.
on GB News. Mike Parry, Stephen Pound. How are you?
Parry's
Apart
very
from
cross
chatting.
about the train strike, which is hardly getting any coverage tonight because people are sick to death of ASLEF, the train drivers who are already on 64,000 a year.
They could have 65 grand a year for a 4-day week, right, if they accept the offer. But the thing that most irritated me yesterday was I had to get in and out of London for a job I was doing elsewhere. It took 2.5 hours to get in the morning and 1.5 hours to get out in the afternoon. 4 hours to get in out of London in a journey that normally takes 40 minutes. But my biggest bugbear is, why aren't the rail companies using the laws the government have given them to stop these things happening? I don't understand it.
Because they don't care.
Because you know and I know that if the government actually brought in a no-strike law and said, thou shalt come to work, they'd just throw a sickie. You've got to negotiate your way around this. You can't use a sledgehammer.
They've got it in Germany. They've got it in lots of European countries, Stephen. Why can't we do it here?
You look at... I mean, I take your point about Germany, but look at the terms and conditions that the German rail workers have. Our people would be green with envy. They've got fabulous terms and conditions there.
Do they get £65,000 a year?
They get considerably more than that because...
They do. They get 100,000 a year in Germany. They're very well paid. But, Stephen, tell me this. If a government goes to the trouble of introducing laws and then the people running the trains, the body that officially runs them, ignores them, then we've got anarchy, haven't we?
And the Transport Secretary, does anybody know his name? Yeah. Do you know his name?
It's
Mark Harper,
isn't it?
But most people, if you walk into this building, most people wouldn't know who he was.
Well, he was something else 5 minutes ago.
But it's usually Grant Shapps, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's done every other job. Yeah,
right. We weren't actually going to talk about that, but I'm sure a lot of people at home relate to this.
Because a lot of people would have just stayed at home.
Well, of course they will. I've just come through Paddington Station, which is round the corner. There are no trains. There are no people. How do you get a thriving economy when you bring half it to a halt like this?
I know, it's hopeless.
And you can't get through passport control anyway.
Right.
No, I mean, let's not forget it's Stephen's mates in the unions.
Well, that's it, absolutely.
Right, can we talk about this new rules? Actually, they're not rules, are they? It's guidance around social media, Stephen. And children having to confirm who they are with a passport image.
I'm sorry, the minute you start asking young children to actually put their personal details out there, passport details and photographs, that opens the door to the most sinister and horrific potential, not just control, but this could actually be, commercially useful, all sorts of things. Look, the reality is that kids will find their way around these things anyway.
They always do.
I'm sorry, where is the element of parental control in this?
Right.
Battling against...
Sorry, as the parent of two young girls.
I'll tell you where it is. I'll tell you where it is. Relentlessly battling against children who are always one step ahead of you when it comes to sort of technology. And I am pretty good, but it is still very, very difficult. But I don't like that. This puts me as a parent in a dilemma, this, Mike, because I want them to watch less inappropriate content. But I don't also want them to think it's normal to put their face and their passport and their ID.
I agree with Stephen.
I don't want that to be normal for them.
I think it's ridiculous. So the lady doing this, Michelle Donnellan, right, she's technology secretary. She uses the word, which I always feel politicians use when they want to say I'm getting tough, robust. We're introducing robust age checks. We all know the kids will get over it. And I always go back to the basic premise that I believe in, is that if the filthy content wasn't there, the children couldn't access it. Can't we do it from the other end of the telescope and tell the giant media companies in America, introduce a piece of equipment that means it can't get into the system? Because they must be able to do it. They make billions of pounds of profits.
I can remember writing about this when Cameron was Prime Minister. He had a big summit at Downing Street with Google and all those people, and they were going to introduce you have to opt in to see this muck. And it was going to happen. It was agreement. It never happened. You have to opt in to see the porn. You have to opt in to see to get into the darknet. A very simple device. But they won't do it, Mike, because it costs them money.
When all else fails, follow the money. Look, people are making a huge amount of money about this. That money is being paid to somewhere, whether it's being paid in Bitcoin or sterling or yen, who knows, but it's being paid somewhere. Track the money back. and then you will find the source of it. The minute it becomes commercially unviable, then it stops. But the other thing is, people in all weird parts, a lot of this comes from Russia, a lot of this comes from some of the former Soviet countries. We should be able to track this back and actually cut it off at source. I think, Mike makes a good point about the wrong end of the telescope. We're looking at it in the kid's bedroom when we're actually looking at it in some sweaty cellar in Ekaterinburg with half a dozen cyber pirates.
If you ask the Chinese to stop it happening, they would, because they're so good with AI. They're infiltrating every government computer in the world, and they would do it. And the other thing about Michelle Donnelly, she says they could be fined up to billions of pounds.
They won't be.
Well, they earn about 100 billion a year.
In a minute. Dream on, baby.
The one good thing, I think, from this advice is Melanie Dawes, Ofcom Chief Executive, has said that the companies have to tame these aggressive algorithms. So, in other words, if a child looks at content on, let's say, self-harming or suicide, the phone will give them more of that content. They have to be... They can switch off those algorithms. They can do that. And that's what they should be forced to do.
This is the problem when it links on with it. I had a situation when I was an MP where we had a Mormon bishop came to see. He was complaining about this idea of this underwear that they have, the Mormons have to wear, which is supposed to be flame-proof. And the woman in my office...
Why would you need flame-proof underwear?
Well, it's sort of like a chastity thing, as far as I can gather. Anyway, but the point being, I Googled, strange and unusual underwear on my computer in the office. And next thing I know, I was being inundated with a tsunami of absolute crotchless knickers and the foul filth. And the porn squad then came round to my office in Parliament Street and said, "We understand you've been accessing inappropriate material, Mr. Powell." And I'm sorry, I have no interest
Mormon bishop
in edible knickers and things.
Well,
the Mormon bishop, excuse me, by the way.
Yeah. Too much information there. And do we not think a 13-year-old kid is capable of forging a passport identity? I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
They're brighter than the politicians who are coming up.
Of course they are.
It's a mess. It's a mess. Now, can we just bring you some breaking news, gentlemen? England and Manchester City star Jack Grealish, heard of him, Andrew?
Yeah.
He's been fined £666 for speeding at 44 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone in North Worcestershire in July last year. I don't think it's going to cripple him.
What'll that be, a minute's wages?
Jack Grealish is an interesting character. He was the most fouled player in the Premier League last year because he's also the most irritating player. He's the sort of person, as Mike and I both played football, the sort of person who's absolutely a nasty, niggling, little backbiting...
He goes down all the time.
With his socks round his ankles all the time. And that ludicrous hairband.
You're now losing the room here, gentlemen.
But the trouble is, he is capable of a divine ball into the box from time to time.
He is, but to put his financial situation into perspective, A, he's Britain's most expensive footballer at 100 million. B, he recently signed a commercial deal to promote Boots for 10 million. And C, he gets paid about £300,000 a week.
My word.
So 606. It's ridiculous. They should have banned him.
No, they shouldn't.
Make an example.
Or
find him a lot of money.
Well, I'm sorry, Andrew.
44 is a bit fast in a 30-mile zone.
I know, but here's an interesting thing. Mrs. P is a senior magistrate on the Middlesex bench, and she's quite brutal. And when they actually fine people, they actually take their income into account.
Yes.
And so if somebody comes up in front of her at Uxbridge Magistrates, and they're a multi-billionaire, they get a multi-billion fine.
Well, how did he get 666 quid?
Well, because the judge is probably a Man City supporter.
All the 60s. All the 60s.
No, that is remarkable. I read about a bloke who was a Ferrari driver who got fined £27,000 on the speeding offence.
Well, that would be better.
Yeah.
Because and you put the money to some decent causes.
I know, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if he gets a ban, he'll just get a chauffeur. Of
course he will.
This is the thing now. We are moving genuinely towards a world in which the super rich can just live completely free and make no changes.
Absolutely. You won't even need
normal people who are losing our licences doing 30, 40 and a 30.
We socialists have been saying that.
I know.
Actually,
isn't it weird what's happened to politics?
Why couldn't they make him do a bit of community service with young lads and young girls who want to play football? That would be really good.
Because he's a role model to some people.
He
won't need a chauffeur because clubs like Manchester City have fleets of 4x4 cars which ferry their players all over the world anyway.
Oh, you know what? We didn't even get onto the fact that the BBC isn't serving the viewers properly when it comes to the migration debate.
What a surprise.
We'll talk about that
Have you got any new news?
First, though, here's Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev Turner, thank you very much. The top stories at 10:30. Social media companies are being warned they could be banned for those under 18 if they don't keep children safe. The media regulator Ofcom says platforms must take action to stop their algorithms recommending harmful content to children. Its draft Children's Safety Codes of Practice sets out how it expects some of the world's biggest online platforms to protect children online and penalties for companies who fail to comply. Two-thirds of NHS trusts are missing their target to treat patients within 18 weeks of referral, according to analysis by Labour. The party says 114 trusts out of 167 have failed to meet the target in any month since December 2019. Most also failed to ensure patients faced waits of less than 4 hours in A&E departments. The sentence of Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacane will be reviewed by the Court of Appeal over concerns it may have been unduly lenient. The 32-year-old was found to have been suffering paranoid schizophrenia. Calacane was given an indefinite hospital order for the manslaughter of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Coomer and Ian Coates last June. The Attorney General's office is expected to argue that he should be given a hybrid order, seeing him treated in hospital before being transferred to prison. And rail passengers are facing more travel disruption due to ongoing strikes by train drivers, making it the longest ever dispute in the rail industry. Members of ASLEF are walking out, affecting services across England, Wales and Scotland. The few services that are running will start later and finish earlier than usual. ASLEF says its members haven't had a pay rise in 5 years and it's accusing the government of giving up trying to resolve the dispute. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2479 and €1.1612. The price of gold is £1,849.88 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,343 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come, the Guardian newspaper is celebrating this morning because it had nothing better to do than draw attention to the Garrick Club membership. Andrew Pearce is a member.
Very recently.
193 years. They've been forced, because of public shame, to allow women in as members. Would we even want to be? Oh, it doesn't look much fun. Is it fun?
Yeah, I quite like it. That's why I joined. But I just joined a few weeks ago, and the vote last night was 59-41 or 60-40. Pretty decisive.
I think my problem is the fact that they were forced into it by public campaign with The Guardian. It's not something that anyone was particularly bothered to do.
The Guardian pointed out that the Cabinet Secretary, the most senior civil servant man, was a member. Common knowledge, actually.
Yeah,
wasn't because it's not a secret, but he then quit as a result.
Pathetic.
And then it went to this vote, and they've now voted to allow women members. Beverly Turner clearly isn't going to join.
That and a lot more. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M74 in Glasgow, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident at junction 1A at Polmaddy, causing queues from junction 2A at Cambuslang. In County Down, the A24 is partly blocked by an accident at Carryduff, causing queues. There's disruption to a number of train services in parts of England again today because of industrial action, with no service on a number of routes. There's a reduced service too on a number of others. The M40 in Warwickshire is closed northbound from junction 12 at Gaydon to 14 at Leamington after an accident. There are queues towards the closure. Delays too as you divert. On the M32 in Bristol, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident between junctions 3 and 2 from St Paul's to Eastville, causing queues. And people arriving into UK airports this morning may experience delays at border control after technical problems last night. Outbound passengers shouldn't be affected. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the Green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
So, a private members club in London, the Garrick Club, has voted to allow women members for the first time in its history.
So it's been around for 193 years. Women were not allowed as members, but they could go in as guests of male members. But there was a vote last night. 60% said time to allow women in on equal terms.
We don't really care about being part of a stuffy boys' club, and to join us to talk about this is Georgia Gilholy. Good morning, Georgia. Do women care about this? Have The Guardian got nothing better to do?
Apparently not, considering we have a huge range of domestic and global crises ongoing at the moment. I think, first and foremost, this was a campaign. It's been successful now by and for elites. I believe the chief reporter at The Guardian who spearheaded this was Amelia Gentleman.
That's right.
And in the initial coverage, she didn't even mention that her father-in-law, I believe, Stanley Johnson, obviously the father of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a very influential member of the Tory party. She didn't mention that he was a member, which I find bizarre. It's something that should have gone on that list if it was a list of influential members, which it was.
So hang on a minute, who's that?
Amelia Gentleman wrote the story in The Guardian. She's married to Joe Johnson, Boris's brother.
Boris's brother.
And so Stanley is a member of the Garrick, but she omitted that from her piece.
Ah. Yeah. And I think, you know, the majority of British women won't have even heard of the Garrick Club, nor any sort of private members' clubs in London. It's a very kind of elite inside thing.
It's actors, lawyers, writers.
Yeah, and I think they absolutely have their place, especially for networking with people in different careers or the same career as you. I think they have their place, holding charity events, that kind of thing, and conferences. But I think, you know, to force women to be members doesn't make any sense.
Here's the thing. If this is meant to be a feminist campaign to help women, it doesn't work because, why? Women struggle, I think, Georgia, to get professional advancement because men are not very good at cross-gender networking, I would argue. So I think there is a lot of networking goes on in these clubs. There's a lot of backslapping. There's a lot of, you do a deal with me, I'll do a deal with you. We already have members' clubs mixed, and that stuff is still not happening. Just putting men and women together in this one space isn't going to help women in terms of cross-gender networking. What do they? So what do you think is actually behind it? What are they trying to do?
I think there's a certain subsection of the media and the political elite who kind of see these very small issues as kind of getting one over on certain groups of men, people who they may actually, you know, share an office with sometimes. And I think also it's so easy to focus on something really this minimal that no one actually cares about. They don't want to talk about, you know, historically low conviction rates for sexual offences or for female genital mutilation, which usually only happens in certain immigrant communities. These are really uncomfortable moral issues to discuss that often lead to people being offended and that kind of thing. This is very easy because everyone in their friend group or everyone who might join this club with them agrees with them. They're not changing anything. And as you're saying, it's a very kind of secluded elite club, and it's not something that's going to help the majority of women or just women starting out in their career.
Do you remember, I can remember back in 2008 when he was leader of the opposition, David Cameron resigned from White's. Now, that is probably one of the poshest of these Whitehall clubs, as I call them, because it had women weren't allowed. Guess what? Now he's no longer Prime Minister. He's back as a member of White's. Yeah. Just ludicrous, sort of, the worst sort of virtue signalling.
It's all just PR management, really. It's kind of something that is filling a gap in the media at that time and can try and help sort of make certain MPs or lawyers, Charlotte Proudman, for example, look better campaigning against this. And you have MPs backing this campaign who we know attend Islamic community centres or mosques that have gender segregation, which is absolutely their right as a religious institution to do. But I think it's evidence of the fact that these kind of segregations exist in certain places and we ought to respect that. And I think that we don't live in a society like Afghanistan or Iran, thankfully, where we have very harsh sex segregation as sort of part of everyday life. I think that's unhealthy and dysfunctional.
And what about, I mean, I'm just looking here, the University Women's Club, a haven, it's described as a haven in London for educated women. It's been around since 1886. The Guardian aren't making a fuss about that, having only women members. That's OK?
I suppose it's because, you know, the majority of people working at The Guardian, especially on this series of reports, will be people who obviously buy into the kind of critical theory nonsense that, you know, women are an oppressed minority, which is odd because women aren't really a minority. They're roughly half of the population in the UK. And kind of we need, you know, specific kind of discrimination to help us, which is ridiculous. We need to acknowledge, obviously, that women and men are different. You know, for example, in their careers, women might have different experiences because they might get pregnant or something like that. But it doesn't mean that we need to force our way into spaces that are meant for men to network.
Also, the irony, though, because I can't believe for a second that any of these Guardian journalists would want to be a member. It's not like they're breaking down the door so they can go and share in this elite social group, do you think?
People
wouldn't they hate to be spending whatever it is, over £1,000 a year membership anywhere?
Well, the reality is that social mobility is at its lowest in 50 years, and in journalism especially, that's a very difficult issue, and I think it's because our comprehensive system just does not help people advance in careers they want. So I think the reality is, if you're working at The Guardian, you're part of that elite anyway. Yeah. So £1,000 a year is sort of, you know.
They don't want to go, but they just want to spoil it for the people. They don't want to be there themselves.
But where could this go to? If you think about Cambridge, Newnham College, very famous college, run by women, for women academics. Is that going to change? Should it change? Why should it? It's been very successful for...
I'm not familiar with each college, but I think some Oxford colleges already have started to admit people who, you know, identify as the gender they weren't born with, that kind of thing. So I think we already see those walls breaking down. I think it's a shame because, especially in education, actually, there's evidence that kind of separating boys and girls or young men and women actually helps.
Yeah.
And that's historically what we've done, you know, for thousands of years, really. So.
Yeah.
Are you a member of a club?
I'm not. I've been to events with them and that kind of thing. I don't know if I would join one in the future. It's definitely not on my list at the moment, especially as you're saying they're quite expensive.
Yeah.
I'd rather join like a trade association that there are some in the city that for different professions. There's one that journalists can join and they do lots of charity work and stuff. So I'm thinking of joining that.
All right, thank you, Georgia. Thank you so much for coming in. Georgia Gilhooly there. Now, up next, travel chaos at the airports this morning. Stansted. I think this is what we're looking at here. This is Stansted. This is the facial recognition technology at passport control, where you stand there, you put your face up against that screen, you hold your passport on the machine, and guess what? The machine's broke down. You had to bring in people.
In 7 airports.
Was it 7 airports?
7 airports
across the country?
Chaos.
Right, this is Britain's Newsroom. More on that in just a moment.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It should be a dry day for most of us. There's a bit of a cloudier start across the east coast. That's because some clouds pulled in overnight. That should slowly start to burn back throughout this morning and into the afternoon. There could also be some cloudier skies across western coasts into this afternoon, but I think many inland areas will see some long-lived sunshine. It will feel quite warm in the sunshine. However, notice across northwestern areas of Scotland, we're starting to see some rain approach through this afternoon. That'll mainly be restricted to the Western Isles, perhaps parts of the Highlands, and it will feel a little bit cooler here with a bit of a breeze, but in the sunshine, highs of 21 degrees are expected this afternoon, so a similar feel to yesterday. Through this evening, that rain will continue to persist across the far northwest, turning heavy at times, but it will remain restricted to the north of Scotland. Elsewhere, it should stay dry overnight, but again, we could see some mist and fog starting to develop. Some drizzly rain is also possible over parts of the Pennines and southern Scotland. Should be another fairly mild night, despite any clearer skies. So a bright start for many areas of the UK on Thursday, perhaps some mist and fog that will be fairly quick to clear, and it's going to be another dry, bright and sunny day on Thursday. However, across the far northwest of Scotland, still skies will remain cloudier. Rain should start to ease though as you head towards the afternoon, with some brightness developing here as well. But in the sunshine, highs of 22 or 23 degrees, so rather warm with high UV levels.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What's the time? 10:48. Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Lots of people getting in touch.
That's right. So KG has said men are happy with women being women. Some women dislike men doing men things, simply because some women feel inferior within themselves.
I was told
not just that.
I was told this lovely story about one member of the Garrick who's in his 90s said, "We can't have women members. My wife won't let me go to the club anymore."
Oh, well...
Don't you love it?
It's brilliant, isn't it? And this, you've all been getting in touch as well about these digital ID fails at the passport control. Just a girl has said, you know what replaces the e-gates? Civil servants, well, employees of the airport, I suppose.
Wait, it's Border Force.
Border Force.
Yeah.
Well, yes, of course it's Border Force.
It's Border Force's
But
job.
it's civil servants.
Yeah. And,
I'm
they'd
all right with Border Force.
Yeah, and there'd
servants.
be a queue. They'd ask you questions.
More of those.
And...
Yeah. As a woman, it only seems to go one way, says Joanne. I don't think many men would bother about women-only clubs.
Well, that's what I was asking. If you are a member of one of these women-only clubs, we'd love to hear from you.
Maggie, who is a member of gbnews.com, thank you. That's the only members club that we're on board with.
Yeah.
I can't lie, Maggie.
Keep joining us.
Who are women who will join this club? Barristers, Crown Court judges? It's hardly open to ordinary women.
Yeah,
Good point.
I think the criteria is actor, legal, journalist.
It's in the theatre district
writer.
in London, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's in Garrick Street.
And Greg has said, I'd love to hobnob in the Garrick Club with the elites just for a day to see what goes on. Andrew Pearce, can you get me a membership? That's Greg in Cumbria.
And Greg, I'm not elite. Definitely not.
Oh, you are a bit.
Get out of this. It's a great place to go if you have been to the theatre and you want to have a beer after the theatre.
Yeah.
Because it's right in the heart of Theatreland, so it's very nice. It's a nice club.
Right. It has been chaos at airports across the country. Thousands of people were left stranded because of this passport IT systems. These e-gates went down.
Passengers had to queue for up to 2 hours, some even longer, I think, because and border staff, gracious me, they had to manually process their passports and said, how terrible is that?
Well, we're joined now by the travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minnow. Good morning, Lisa. This will make people's hearts sink as we look forward to the summer holidays and the weather getting nicer here. I'm actually getting on a plane tomorrow from Stansted, indeed. And it does make me nervous about travelling. We need people to be confident that they can get to the airport smoothly, can't we? But that isn't there at the moment, Lisa.
No, I mean, and you know, this is worrying because this is just the second time in a couple of weeks that we've seen the e-gates go down. It happened a couple of weeks ago at certain airports. It was a partial outage. But this total outage, that's 270 e-gates across all of our airports, and not just airports, train stations, all went down at the same time. Delays of up to 4 hours, I'm hearing, because people were being kept on planes because there physically wasn't enough room in the terminals to have everyone queuing up. So it pretty is worrying, and comes exactly a year after exactly the same total outage happened in the last May bank holiday.
Look, neither of are technical, but we call it an outage. I mean, effectively, it's like a power cut, so they all went down. How can it have happened again when we had this big problem a year ago? Why haven't they fixed it?
Well, it does seem to me that perhaps there's some kind of an issue when you've got lots of people travelling. So this would have been the busiest weekend of the year so far because of the bank holiday. And then, of course, by Tuesday, you've got people coming back, having been away for that lovely long weekend. And it seems to be when there's lots of people travelling, the system can't cope. Now, we've got to build some kind of resilience into these technology systems because 70% of people who are using an airport will go through an e-gate. It's not just Brits, it's people from the EU, from America, Canada, Australia. Now, if you've actually staffed up your border force staff to only process 30% of the people coming through the airport, it will inevitably turn to chaos if those gates fail.
The irony is these wretched things are supposed to be progress, Lisa.
Yep, exactly that. And, you know, this is the problem. We've become so much more reliant on these kind of technologies. As you say, border force staff not staffing up for the number of people at the airport because we rely on the technology. And I think this is a forecast of what could come. I mean, we've got the idea coming very soon that actually you won't even have to put your passport onto a little scanner when you go through e-gates in the future. It will all be biometric. They will just be checking your eyeball. We've got the new entry-exit system to get us in and out of Europe coming up soon. That's going to involve everyone having their fingerprints taken and their eyes checked as well. And all of this involves technology. And when technology goes wrong, that's when we seem to have these really massive problems.
Yeah, Lisa, just explain that to our viewers, because it's got very little press attention here, actually, how it's changing across Europe, and actually that we will have to be, if we want to go into Europe, even though we're not in the EU, we, as British citizens, will also have to have our biometrics taken.
That's right. I mean, this is any third-party country. Now, this is a long-delayed system. Even the EU have admitted that actually this technology is very difficult to put in place. So you've got the entry-exit system that's coming in. That will involve everybody having their fingerprints taken and their eyes biometrics checked. And basically, they'll renew it on a sort of rolling basis. But if you think about our ports, people who are used to just being able to drive onto a Eurotunnel train or onto a ferry, now every single person is going to have to get out of the car, is going to have to make sure they've had their fingerprints and eyes done. Now, that is going to involve huge queues, I think, and we've already got a House of Lords report coming out this week, which is saying exactly that. We haven't yet addressed what's going to happen when this system finally gets put in place.
And what is the point of it? Is it supposed to enhance security?
Yes, and it's something very similar to what we're actually going to be doing here in the UK as well. Our systems, again, it's enhancing security. It's making sure that only people that we want in the country can actually access the country.
And we know it won't work like that at all. It will control all of us. Lisa Minnow, always great to see you. Yeah. It's not going to do anything about illegal immigration.
If only we could stop illegal immigration.
We are all going to be a data set and therefore infinitely controllable.
Yeah,
I hate these conspiracy theories coming true.
What do they do with that information? They don't give it away.
And what do they do under a politician that you don't like? Here's the weather. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Fog and mist should continue to clear through the rest of the day, bringing sunny spells for many of us. However, in the north and west, some rain is likely to arrive across parts of northwest Scotland. That's because weather fronts are still approaching these areas, but elsewhere, high pressure is building in. So that should bring plenty of dry weather and bright weather. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas through this afternoon. There could still be some fog and low cloud lingering across eastern coast close to the North Sea, and we could also see some low cloud across the south coast as well later on today. But in the best of the sunshine, highs are 22, possibly 23 across central areas of England, eastern Wales as well. It will be that much cooler underneath the cloud and rain, though, across parts of the Highlands and the Western Isles, and that rain will likely turn quite persistent overnight and will push elsewhere into many areas of Scotland. We could also see some drizzly rain across parts of the Pennines, some other areas of northern England as well. So a cloudier night for northern areas. In the south, though, it should stay dry and fairly clear, though we could see some mist and fog around, but it's likely to be another fairly mild start to the day on Thursday. And I think Thursday is going to be a warmer day than today. There'll be more in the way of sunshine for a wider area of the UK. Some mist and fog to start. That should clear much more quickly than it has done today. We will see a few more in the way of cloud bubbling up in the afternoon across southern areas. That could allow a shower to develop, but I think most areas should stay dry, and we could see highs of 24 degrees in the sunshine.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria De Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 8th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, very good morning. An independent review into the BBC has told the broadcaster that it is not racist to air concerns about migration and that they view the topic through a narrow political lens. We could have told them that.
Same old BBC. Thousands of passengers were stranded at airports across Britain last night as the e-gate system failed again. That technology now doesn't seem such a good idea, does it?
And keeping children safe online, Ofcom could introduce strict new age restrictions to use social media. If young people want to check Facebook, they will need to have their photo ID ready.
And the Home Secretary says pubs can extend their opening hours to 1 a.m. if England or Scotland make it to the Euros 2024 semi-finals this summer. He's all heart, isn't he, that James Cleverly?
Well, the hospitality industry, as you would imagine, is really welcoming this move. But of course, the one caveat is that England and Scotland, or Scotland, do very well in the competition. They need to at least reach the semi-finals before there's any prospect of a late drink.
Thinking, which politician thought, I know what we'll do? We'll give the British public a treat of a little extra hour of drinking if we do well in the Euros. No, just give us that anyway. Help the pubs. We're not here to be given, like you said before, the crumbs.
It is a crumb off the table.
Honestly. Did you have a word with them?
I bumped into him last night, James Cleverly, the Home Secretary. He was pleased as punch. Because he thought
that was a good idea?
Yeah.
James Cleverly, give me a call and I'll tell you what real people think.
I wonder if it'll come up at Prime Minister's Questions today.
It might do. Tom and Gloria are going to be covering Prime Minister's Questions for us this afternoon, and they want your questions. What would you ask the Prime Minister today? gbnews.com/your say. First, though, Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev Turner, thank you. Social media companies are being warned that they could be banned for those under 18 if they don't keep children safe. The media regulator Ofcom says platforms must take action to stop their algorithms recommending harmful content to children. Its draft Children's Safety Codes of Practice sets out how it expects some of the world's biggest online platforms to protect online children and penalties for companies who fail to comply. Energy Security Secretary Claire Coutinho told GB News the UK aims to be the safest in the world.
When I was Children's Minister, I looked at well-being, and one of the things that I was really interested in was the link between how much time our children are spending online and their mental health. And for me, there was two things. It's what they could access, and I'm really pleased that we're doing the online safety legislation because that will tackle that part, but it's also what it's stopping them doing. So that's the things that I care about. I definitely welcome government's efforts to act on this and make sure that we're the safest place in the country when it comes to, in the world when it comes to being online for children.
2/3 of NHS trusts are missing their target to treat patients within 18 weeks of referral, according to analysis by Labour. The party says 114 trusts out of 167 have failed to meet the target in any month since December 2019. Trusts are meant to ensure that 92% of patients are treated within 18 weeks of GP referral. Most trusts also failed to meet targets, ensuring that most patients wait less than 4 hours in A&E departments. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the government is failing to properly fund Britain's health service.
This is a consequence of 14 years of the Conservatives driving our NHS into the ground. So what's Labour's solution? We would introduce a proper tax on the very super wealthy non-doms, and we would use the proceeds from that to fund extra appointments, 2 million extra appointments a year in our NHS, so we can start driving those waiting times down. So that if you're waiting for a hip replacement or a knee replacement or hernia perhaps, a cataract operation you need, you can get your operations on time. Too many people are waiting in pain and agony at the moment for an operation after 14 years of the Conservatives.
3 judges at the Royal Courts of Justice hearing a bid to change the sentence of triple killer Valdo Calicane say they'll give their decision at a later date. Calicane, who has paranoid schizophrenia, was given an indefinite hospital order. This after he killed Barnaby Webber, Grace Amali Kuma and Ian Coates last June. But the sentence is being reviewed by the Court of Appeal over concerns it may have been unduly lenient. Rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today due to ongoing strikes by train drivers, making it the longest ever dispute in the rail industry. Members of ASLEF are walking out, affecting services across England, Wales and in Scotland. The few services that are running will start later and finish earlier than usual. ASLEF says its members haven't got a pay rise in 5 years and is accusing the government of giving up trying to resolve the dispute. John Swinney was sworn in as the new First Minister of Scotland at a ceremony in Edinburgh in the last hour. He told GB News it's an enormous privilege.
It's an enormous honour to come to the Court of Session and to be sworn in a link to the history and the roots of our country, our democracy and the rule of law. So for me, an enormous honour and a privilege to do that, and look forward very much to doing so. A big surprise for me and an enormous privilege, and as I said yesterday, I'm here to serve everyone in Scotland and I look forward to doing so.
In the US, a judge has indefinitely postponed Donald Trump's trial over claims he illegally kept classified documents after leaving office. It had previously been scheduled to begin in just under 2 weeks' time. The decision was made due to still unresolved issues in the case and because the former president's currently attending a separate trial over hush money allegations. He denies all the charges made against him. And last drinks will come a little later this summer if England or Scotland make it to the Euro semi-finals. Venues will be allowed to stay open for an extra hour or two on match days, pushing closing times to 1 a.m. if either or both teams reach the last four or the final. Most pubs shut by 11 p.m. But the law allows some ministers to relax licensing hours to mark occasions of exceptional national significance. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Welcome back. It is 11:07. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce.
Well, what about this? The BBC has been told they must reflect public concerns about immigration. Really?
That's right. This report was commissioned by the broadcaster and they were told it was not racist to discuss the channel, basically proving what GB News has known all along, that mass immigration has an effect on people in this country as well, and we should be OK to talk about that.
NHS, schools, jobs, wages.
Editor-at-large from the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, joins us now. Charlotte, good to see you. We're going to talk about the royals with you as well, but first of all, it just seems outrageous that the BBC has to have a report commissioned to conclude that they have to take a more balanced approach to immigration.
Yeah, it's sort of what we all know, and obviously what GB News has been talking about for ages. And in the report, it used this word problematic. I have a problem with that word problematic because it's widespread now and it's a real sort of woke term that people use. And it also, people are very afraid. People are very afraid, this report has shown, at the BBC, of being problematic. It's sort of like the worst thing you could be accused of being. And so they won't, you know, investigate both sides of the argument in case they're accused of being problematic or worse, racist.
Yeah.
And we know, it's obvious, isn't it? It's not rocket science. Mass immigration is causing huge problems for schools, housing, NHS, jobs.
Integration.
And integration, social cohesion. We saw some of the results in the local elections last week where Muslim candidates, some of whom are Islamists who want a Muslim caliphate, are now elected members.
Yeah, and I think what this BBC report is saying is that by completely ignoring other people, you know, in this argument, people in, say, Kent, and actually being quite snobbish, I find the BBC is very snobbish towards people who say, gosh, the landscape of my local town has changed. Is it OK to talk about this? And the answer from the BBC is no, slap wrists, you know, snobby, you're just sort of lowest common denominator for bringing this up. And it's not, it's a real thing that's happening to real people.
And they took the same view on Brexit, which they almost ignored, and people who supported Brexit were dismissed as nasty, working class, white, racist. That's me, thank you.
Yeah,
well,
that's widespread.
And the report concluded the BBC's coverage should have equal empathy for migrants and UK residents who worry about the impacts of migration. Do you think it will make any difference to the BBC's coverage?
I actually think it could do, because it gives people you know, a licence to look at both sides of the story at last, without feeling like they're going to be sort of chastised by their colleagues or by their viewers, I think it could make a difference. It's kind of giving them, to use modern woke speak, permission to talk about things a bit more openly. So
it's amazing.
Step forward.
But it's amazing it takes a report by the Migration Observatory done by Dr. Madeleine Sumption to tell them what we've already know.
Yeah, but that's classic BBC,
isn't it?
You have to have a report on the report on the report.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can say cautiously something that's just actually a fact that we all know, the rest of us know, and know here at GBNews.
We need to give the statement. Sir Nicholas Sirota, BBC board member and chair of the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee, said, as recent events confirm, migration is a highly contested area of public policy, and that is why the BBC reporting on it must meet the highest editorial standards. He goes on.
Yeah, this Board Commission review finds BBC coverage of migration has many strengths, but it could better reflect the topic's complexities, as well as ensuring coverage is not overly dominated by political and high-profile voices.
Right, Charlotte, let's talk about royals and Harry being here today and his father not seeing him. Should we read a lot into that, do you think?
I actually think we can read a lot into this. I'm actually really surprised. I think this is the saddest development yet, actually, because, you know, he's obviously very ill with cancer. He saw his son last time in February, last time it came over, and this is a genuine snub. I mean, it's not a perceived snub, and Harry often perceives snubs that are not there, but this one is real. You know, he refused to see his son.
He can say, because they're saying diary commitments, but everybody can find 10 minutes, breakfast maybe.
He's the King of England, of course he can clear up his diary.
Yeah.
And actually, he's going to be at a Buckingham Palace garden party. I mean, in another
where
world,
he'll meet 4,000 people.
Totally. It'll be totally normal for Harry to just, you know, be invited along. Sorry, Harry, I'm busy. I'm having this massive garden party. Come and stand by my side for the 2-hour event. You know, let's catch up in between tea.
Or have a chat before we go into the party or after the party.
There's any number of moments.
And what about the announcement, Charlotte, that came out yesterday, which you and I both thought, blimey, that's very significant, coming out of the palace?
Yeah.
About William and his father.
So, there were two announcements. There was Harry's yesterday as well, which was also so pointed. But the William one was that he's going to do a joint engagement with his father next week, and that William is going to take over a very important role as head of the Army Air Corps. Well, obviously, this is something Harry really wanted, and it's a regiment that Harry served in. It just seemed incredibly pointed. The statement was released late last night, as all of this stuff about Charles not meeting Harry was developing. So it felt incredibly pointed.
A bit spiteful?
I think spiteful. I think, actually, you reap what you sow. I think Harry's finally getting a taste of his own medicine, you know? These kind of pointed statements that we get from Harry all the time, you know, they're not being matched by statements by the royals, because they can't. They just have to keep saying no comment. But they can...
Never complain, never explain.
Yes, but they can release pretty savage announcements, such as the one last night, which is that actually William's going to be in charge of
Do you think, though, both of you are much more invested in the royal stories? You've worked there for years, and you, amongst that beat, Andrew, and you do Charlotte now. Though, is it that it could get to the point where if Charles and William are sufficiently mean to Harry that it could change public opinion and people start to feel sorry for him?
It could be, and this is what Harry's wanted all along. So Harry said to the world, look how awful they are to me for the last few years. And we've all said, no, that's you know, in most cases he's cited...
You brought this on yourself.
It was brought this on yourself. Or, actually, Harry, that wasn't a slight. That wasn't... Clearly, you weren't being pushed out. Clearly, the Queen went to great lengths to welcome Meghan. Harry perceived constantly that he was being pushed out. But now he actually is being pushed out. And this could change public opinion the other way.
Yeah, maybe, but I suspect it won't, because I think people think, as you said earlier, the expression I've used earlier, you reap what you sow, mate.
Yeah,
and Harry did not have to put that statement out yesterday afternoon saying, my father's too busy to see me. That was very pointed.
Yeah, it was very pointed. And he said other priorities, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which just felt so...
His father is battling cancer. For all we know, the King was having treatment for cancer. We don't know.
Well, it's a good point. That is a good point. And we know that when Charles comes to London, it is to take treatment for cancer. So, I mean, another argument that people say is, couldn't have Harry have come a couple of days earlier?
He could.
Because Charles has been completely doing nothing since Thursday, and now it's 1 year since he got, you know, the coronation, and now he's ramped up his commitments, and now Harry's come.
Well, wasn't it Archie's birthday on Monday? Well, Harry always manages to use a child's birthday.
Doesn't he always manage to use a child's birthday? Because he could have come next week, or could have come last week.
There could have been other times. I mean, he knew that this week was going to be very, very busy for his father, who's just started to do events again, which is, you know, brand new, really. He's been kind of laying low for a long time. I just think it's all very messy. He could have chosen a better time.
And then Harry's going to disappear later this week with his wife to Nigeria.
Yeah, well, this is another reason that Charles may have refused to see Harry, because if he has a very important meeting with the King of England and then goes on this pseudo-royal tour to Nigeria, which isn't a royal tour, it's something they've taken upon themselves, and they're complete live wires, they might say anything during that royal tour.
Yeah.
And if Charles had just seen Harry beforehand, it could have looked like he was almost endorsing the tour somehow.
Yeah.
You know, there's any number of reasons why this meeting didn't happen, and I think that's probably one of them, to be honest.
She wants to get in touch with her colonial roots, Meghan.
She's 43% Nigerian, she's found out.
She's discovered.
So off she goes to Nigeria. You know, this is a woman who has said that the empire, that the Commonwealth is Empire 2.0. So it's pretty, you know, she is a live wire. Charles will not want to look like he's approving this message in any way, I don't think.
And she's gone to make a programme about herself, which is...
And there'll be a Netflix camera crew in tow, presumably, Charlotte.
There will be, and it will be very scripted and very managed. We know that everything Meghan does is very, very managed, so...
Editor-at-Large Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, still to come, spanked with a rolled-up newspaper.
Not me.
This isn't Andrew Pierce's weekend plans, but a former US president likes it, apparently.
I wonder which one.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. I'll
Guess
just
which
roll
one.
this up while we take a
Just guess
break.
which one.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So, interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Okay.
Are we just putting 2 and 2 together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
You're Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pierce and Bev Taylor. The panel is back. Mike Parry and Stephen Pound.
Right, gentlemen, shall we talk about this BBC migration coverage, about the fact that the BBC handle migration, Mike, in a very one-sided way, that everybody coming here is welcome and it has no impact on the country.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that somebody's now called them out on this.
Well, nobody on the left can see any fault whatsoever in mass immigration. As far as they're concerned, you know, it's all going to revolutionise the economy and they don't see any downside to it. It's amazing, isn't it, that the BBC have actually got to sort of get a senior producer there or a senior programmer to say it's not racist to air concerns about migration. Now, isn't it strange that this seems to have come in the wake of what I would say is an unveiling of wokedom in this country? I mean, this started with the Cass report, Dr. Hilary Cass's Children's Gender report. It's the Prime Minister's picked it up and said you've got to fight back against these woke issues, OK? You know, the idea now that you've got to believe everything you hear on TV from the BBC is being questioned, and that's a good thing, because also there have been a number of complaints recently, which I've been aware of and we must have read about, that the BBC has been less than balanced in its coverage of the Middle East, and that's another issue.
It's the Sorry, Mike, to interrupt you.
Yes, not at all.
But it's the daughter of Lord Sumption, Madeline Sumption, who's done this research, and he's been remarkable, I think, in the last few years, at providing balance in many areas of public life.
But here's the thing. Look, who's the biggest supporter, the biggest fan of mass immigration to this country? It is not the left. Certainly isn't the Labour Party. We introduced the Immigration and Nationality Act back in 2001. It is the bosses of the big firms and the big factories who absolutely glory in the fact you can get people here to work in slaughterhouses and chicken farms. So those are the biggest supporters. But look,
and that's why they opposed Brexit, because they saw Brexit as ending a cheap supply of labour.
Well, I'm not. You know more about. OK, I mean,
they did. The CBI, the
trouble is, every time I've had an argument with you, you've won. So I'm not going to have another one.
But it's a generally accepted point now, isn't it? That
we can have one.
I mean, we were supposed to accept the rabid belief all immigration is good for the economy because it improves GDP. But it doesn't, does it? No. It doesn't improve GDP per head. It might overall, you know, go up by 0.1% through the numbers, right? But as for the individual wealth of people in this country, that, in my view, is going down. And also, who's going to accept that the housing crisis in this country is 90% because of the fact that we've got too many people here?
And Andrew, Mike made a very interesting point a minute ago about the unveiling of wokedom. I don't know if you've been watching Robert Jenrick lately. Robert Jenrick, you know,
touring the studios today,
who is certainly on manoeuvres without any shadow of a doubt. Robert Jenrick is actually saying a lot of these things about the impact, the social and economic and educational impact of mass migration in particular areas and the lack of total integration. And just look at the Green Party council candidates, for example of that.
In Leeds,
I think Mike's right. There is actually, I think we've reached a tipping point now. I mean, I think there's a good aspect. I mean, wokedom just meant being awake and aware of these things, but it got silly. I think we've moved on from that. But watch Jenrick. Jenrick is on manoeuvre as potential future Labour Conservative Party leader.
Yeah, he's published a 115-page report, or a 15-page report today about how to cut back on legal migration, let alone illegal migration, which is running up, what, 750,000, Mike?
Absolutely. And somebody made an observation to me about Jenrick this morning, a very seasoned political observer, who said that he's had his hair cut like a skinhead, he's lost weight, and he's trying to look like a political bruiser.
Isn't that what Osborne did?
It was me, I'm afraid. I wrote it first. He's had a Caesar haircut, he's lost weight, and it's because he's on manoeuvre.
Is that right?
Andrew,
is that right? That's amazing.
Andrew, this thing... Can I just one last quick thing? This thing about legal migration. When I was an MP, I'd very often get somebody to come over here to this country to work as, in a care home. They could then bring 15 or 16 members of their family over here. That is scandalous.
And that's being stopped now.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some breaking news, but also, while we're talking about the BBC, we need to tell you that Sir Nicholas Sirota, BBC board member, has said the board-commissioned review finds the BBC coverage of migration has many strengths, but that it could also better reflect the topic's complexities, as well as ensuring that coverage is not overly dominated by political and high-profile voices. Right, breaking news. Former England cricketer Monty Panesar, he came on this show announcing that he was going to stand for George Galloway's party at the election. Well, now he's announced that he's with...
And it's all your fault. It's all your fault. That was the car crash interview.
We put 10 questions to him and he got 9 wrong.
He has written, I realise I need more time to listen, learn and find my political home, one that aligns with my personal and political values. Well, that's a bit disappointing. What do you make of that, Mike?
After what you did to him,
I was about to say, I think he walked out of here pretty stunned, has gone back, and either somebody said to him, Monty, that was the worst interview of any political potential candidate I've ever seen.
He was going to run for a seat in Ealing, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, Ealing Southall.
And we asked him the population of Ealing. He said 200,000. It's 360,000.
I can virtually name all of them.
The only question he got right was who's top of the football league.
I know.
Arsenal.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is that with him, he thought that NATO was the organisation which was actually stopping migration.
I know.
Yeah, but come on, I'm going to defend him a little bit here. We need people who aren't afraid to go into public life and into politics. I'd love to know what's changed his mind. Was it just those interviews?
Well, I think he's found out he doesn't know anything about politics, and therefore it's a good... I mean, we've got to hand it now to Andrew, because there are some people in politics who are the king makers, and there's some of the king breakers.
we were going to even do a little quiz music, but we weren't allowed to use Mastermind. Remember, we wanted that as the music.
I think...
did get everything wrong.
I think this is a bad news story. I think you want people from outside of politics, particularly, I would say, sport.
Well, if you're going to establish that intelligence is a necessary quality to be a member of Parliament, you've got to have a fairly thin common...
And remember, in 2016, he backed Zach Goldsmith for the Tory mayoralty. In 2019, he thought that who's the current mayor of London?
Sadiq Khan.
He thought Sadiq Khan was going to hand the mayoralty over to him. So he's on quite a political journey here.
Well, we wish him luck anyway with his...
Because he's a nice bloke.
We talk about Donald Trump getting smacked on the bottom with the newspaper, Stephen Pound. This has got you written all over it, this story.
Sorry, smacked with a magazine with a picture of his own face on the front of it.
But this is that Victoria Wood thing about smack me on the bottom with the Woman's Weekly, wasn't it? Let's do it. But
this is Stormy Daniels.
Purely in the interest of research, I've been actually looking into Stormy Daniels, and I discovered that she actually made a film called Desert Stormy, which was a sort of a take on the Iraq War from a most remarkable perspective.
She's a porn star.
They call her an adult star. She's not a flipping adult star. She's a porn star.
Now, remember, children may be watching, Stephen.
Not for much longer they won't if their parents are in the room.
Go on, Mike.
In all honesty, this is just so utterly sordid at every level. The awful business about the silk pyjamas and
sitting around in his boxer shorts.
Well, the stuff she said in court. It's way before the watershed. It shouldn't have been said. Will he survive? They did a poll, didn't they, a couple of days ago, and 80% of the Trump supporters said whatever happens, they'll still support it. However, 20%, which is the highest number ever, has said they're starting to have second thoughts. And in a couple of states, Biden, incredibly, is ahead of Trump.
But the more that comes out, the more people will question whether or not this man can ever return to the White House. I thought that do you see the stock picture from the courtroom? I thought he looked more worried then and older in that shot than I've seen him for a long time. I think his total surround of self-confidence had kind of disappeared. What is it about US presidents? Because ever since John F. Kennedy, right through to Bill Clinton, and now Trump, they take such incredible risks with the opposite sex. You can't believe they've got the intelligence to be a president and act like they do. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
But I wonder how much of it is factored in for Trump.
Well, I think Matthew Parris had a very interesting article in the Times last weekend about risk-taking in politics.
Right, Mike talking about it.
And he's talking about Mark Menzies and how that some politics, the whole business of getting into politics is a huge risk anyway. You invest a huge amount of money to get your seat and you get elected. So there is that sort of dangerous risk element about it. But I would exclude Jimmy Carter from that. Jimmy Carter was...
Well, life is hard for middle-aged babe magnets, isn't it, Mike?
Well, that's absolutely
we all know
right.
he's the middle-aged babe magnet.
Well, yes, I claim that title. But even Jimmy Carter, believe it or not, said, I had lust in my mind. You remember?
He was a Southern Baptist.
Yeah, I do.
Right,
I think Ronald Reagan was all right.
Stay with us on GBNews. We're trying to get Monty Panesar to come and tell us what happened.
He ain't going to come back.
He might.
Yes, he will.
He likes us. Newsroom.
I think Andrew and Bev happened.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:31. It's
Wednesday.
Yeah, it is. So it's PMQs today at midday with Tom Harwood today and Gloria De Piero. They want your questions for the Prime Minister, who's kicking off at midday. But first, we're going to...
I don't know who they've got as their guest today, Gloria.
They had such a good guest last week. They had Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Attorney General, and Esther McVeigh, Minister in the Cabinet Office. Wow, did they have a bust
Gets
up.
fiery.
It was great TV and radio.
Right, Tatiana's waiting for us. Here she is with your news.
Bev, thank you. The latest stories from the GB Newsroom. Social media companies are being warned they could be banned for those under 18 if they don't keep children safe. The media regulator Ofcom says platforms must take action to stop their algorithms recommending harmful content to children. Its draft Children's Safety Codes of Practice sets out how it expects some of the world's biggest online platforms to protect children online and penalties for companies who fail to comply. 2/3 of NHS trusts are missing their target to treat patients within 18 weeks of referral, according to analysis by Labour. The party says that 114 trusts out of 167 have failed to meet the target in any month since December 2019. Most trusts also failed to meet targets, ensuring that most patients wait less than 4 hours in A&E departments. Rail passengers are being hit by more strikes today, with little or no service on many lines. The industry's longest pay dispute is affecting services across England, Wales and Scotland. The ASLEF union says its members haven't had a pay rise in 5 years and accuses the government of giving up trying to resolve the dispute. And last month was the hottest April ever recorded in Britain. It's also the 11th consecutive month of record heat. The EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service says last month was globally warmer than any previous April since 1940. It was also 1.58 degrees warmer than the estimated average for pre-industrial levels. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2492 and €1.1619. The price of gold is £1,852.35 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,360 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
A lot of stories make me angry, but few stories have made me as angry as this morning. Right, this is the fact that the government are going to allow pubs to stay open until 1 o'clock on match days, but only if England or Scotland reach the semi-finals of the Euros this summer.
Well, they open them in Wales and Northern Ireland till 1 o'clock.
Mark White is with us, Home and Security Editor. Can you just make me feel better about this, Mark? Because it makes me want to go and get a tannoy outside 10 Downing Street and say, don't give us these conditional treats and help the hospitality industry.
I think it's marvellous if someone gives me an extra couple of hours.
Me too.
Is it 2 hours?
But don't make it contingent on something I've got no control over.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they do have control over licensing hours effectively, so it is in their gift to give us these extra hours.
But based on whether England do well in the football.
And it used to be down to the local licensing authority, which is the local council.
Well, interesting. Let's just sort of handbrake turn, go back a little bit. So this is effectively if either England or Scotland get through to the latter stages of the competition. So it's the semi-finals on the 9th and the 10th of July, and then the final on the 14th of July. If either team or both teams are still in the competition, then we'll get 2 hours extra. The pubs will be able to open till 1 in the morning in England and Wales. However, we might have the situation where Scotland, the Scottish Government, are saying, well, it's up to local licensing authorities to decide that, nothing to do with us in central government. So you could have the bizarre situation if it comes to pass that they do very well in the competition, that Scotland is playing, say, in the semi-finals or the finals, let's hope so, then they can't drink until 1 in the morning in bars in Scotland, and then they're coming all over the border from my hometown and the Scottish borders, right over to Carlisle and Newcastle to enjoy their drink.
So what if they get into the quarterfinals and they're playing each other? The pubs aren't going to extend that?
Listen, this is it. You know, the whole competition from the very first match in early June when it kicks off. Then, of course, people, and mid-June, I should say, people will be at the pub. They will be enjoying themselves, and some bars already will have late licences. Yeah. So people will be able to enjoy the competition, but clearly this is going to be a countrywide relaxation of these powers to allow people to go out and drink.
Why are they doing this, Mark? Because also, do you know what? The government can't win either way. If England and Scotland do well and the pubs stay open, the government are then basking in a bit of reflected glory that they've had nothing to do with. They've not kicked those balls in the back of the net. And if we do badly and everyone's already depressed, they're going to be double punished by the government not letting them have an extra hour's drinking, 2 hours drinking.
Because they'll be watching whoever's in the final.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt that it would be a popular move for the government if the nation is caught up in Euro 2024 fever and we're doing well, either team or both teams in the competition, and there is a relaxation in the licensing laws. It's a kind of it's a no-lose situation.
Remind me, Mark, what happened last time? Because we got in the final, I do remember that, and I do remember watching it at a friend's house. I wasn't in a pub. Did they extend the licensing till 1 o'clock in the morning?
This is a thing that happens regularly. It happened during some of the royal celebrations, coronation, and I think the Queen's 90th birthday. There was a relaxation.
Really?
I know, you wouldn't
expect... the Queen down the pub. Oh, God. Don't see her as having a pint.
So it's not without precedent. It has happened on numerous occasions. But, hey, I understand you're not very happy about it. But I think many people will be pretty happy at the opportunity to drink a couple of hours if they're
Yes,
given
but
it.
just do that anyway. Don't predicate it on whether we do well in the tournament. Just say, you know what, celebrate. Doesn't matter if it's Germany, France in the final, or it's like, let's help the hospitality
we might want to go
industry.
to the pub and drown our sorrows if we lose.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt the hospitality industry have welcomed this move anyway, regardless. They're expecting a bumper summer because clearly you've got the Euros, you've got all the summer sports like Wimbledon and everything that takes place, and then the key one, the Olympics, that are taking place in Paris. So hopefully, after really difficult period, obviously COVID that they've gone through, but they've gone through a cost of living crisis as well, which has really affected trade with a very significant number of pubs, bars right across the country closing shop because they just can't afford to stay open.
Yeah, and part of the reason they can't afford to stay open is because of the amount of tax the government has put on alcohol.
Well, indeed.
But nobody will be mentioning that when the pubs are
well, the government will certainly benefit from the extra revenue as well because it'll come off in tax for them, so everybody wins.
Is Scotland going to get to the semi-final?
Well,
just ask a football question.
I'm asking. I wouldn't know the answer.
They've been playing quite well, so I certainly hope so.
Who's the manager of Scotland?
Oh God! Don't ask me questions like that.
I know the England manager, Southgate, Gareth Southgate. I saw the play about him.
You saw a play. Steve Clarke apparently is a Scottish
Steve
manager.
Clarke, there we are. Who would have known that? You didn't know
I'm so
that?
out of tune.
Is he Scottish?
Become a southern softie these days.
I don't know.
No.
Well, we love you as a southern softie.
We do.
Right, still to come. We have some great news for people who have peanut allergies. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Fog and mist should continue to clear through the rest of the day, bringing sunny spells for many of us. However, in the north and west, some rain is likely to arrive across parts of northwest Scotland. That's because weather fronts are still approaching these areas, but elsewhere, high pressure is building in. So that should bring plenty of dry weather and bright weather. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas through this afternoon. There could still be some fog and low cloud lingering across eastern coast close to the North Sea, and we could also see some low cloud across the south coast as well later on today. But in the best of the sunshine, highs are 22, possibly 23 across central areas of England, eastern Wales as well. It will be that much cooler underneath the cloud and rain though across parts of the Highlands and the Western Isles, and that rain will likely turn quite persistent overnight and will push elsewhere into many areas of Scotland. We could also see some drizzly rain across parts of the Pennines, some other areas of northern England as well. So a cloudier night for northern areas. In the south though, it should stay dry and fairly clear, though we could see some mist and fog around, but it's likely to be another fairly mild start to the day on Thursday. And I think Thursday is going to be a warmer day than today. There'll be more in the way of sunshine for a wider area of the UK. Some mist and fog to start. That should clear much more quickly than it has done today. We will see a few more in the way of cloud bubbling up in the afternoon across southern areas. That could allow a shower to develop, but I think most areas should stay dry, and we could see highs of 24 degrees in the sunshine.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, 11:43. Two big health stories this morning. Bad news for AstraZeneca and good news for people who have peanut allergies.
Yeah, so doctors have said that children taking part in what's been called a life-transforming clinical trial have been enjoying foods which would normally have triggered severe allergic reactions.
Let's talk to our Health and Social Affairs editor for the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnston, joins us now. Good morning, Lucy. So two big health stories this morning. Let's start with the allergy one. What does this clinical trial show us?
Well, the trial hasn't ended yet, but already the parents of these children are saying that the children have their lives have transformed because they are able to have significant doses of foods that would have normally caused them potentially deadly anaphylactic or allergic reactions. And it's very exciting because to date we haven't had a clinical trial that has shown, that across the board we can help children with severe allergies, and it is one of the fastest growing epidemics, food allergies. It's debated about why, and it's about 10 people die every year because of food allergies. It's a growing problem, and despite rules introduced in 2021 to ensure there was correct labelling on all foodstuffs, still people are dying and being hospitalised because of allergic reactions to foods. It's often milk or peanuts. So what this trial is doing is desensitising individuals to those foodstuffs with tiny, tiny amounts. And big warning, don't try this at home, but it's done under clinical conditions, and each individual person has an amount that they can tolerate, and that is gradually increased. So it just means they don't have to panic and they don't have to worry all the time, potentially, because in case there's cross-contamination or they come into contact with a foodstuff that they're allergic to.
So it's not,
so it's
Lucy,
great.
it's not that these children are being given any sort of medicine or any kind of supplements. They're just being given a little bit of each of these allergens in a controlled situation and then building up their resistance. Am I right?
Exactly, and that's part of the point. A drug company has tried to market this with a particular drug which is on offer privately, but it cost about £10,000 a year for people to use it. So I think there's 500 people on the waiting list to try and get that, and no one. It's not really given out. So what this trial is doing, which has been set up by the Natasha Research Allergy Foundation, and that was the parents of a girl who died of a peanut allergy or nut allergy after eating a baguette. They've set up this research foundation. It's funded by the food industry, and it's trying to democratize this process so that instead of having to buy a drug, these children are given a tiny, tiny dose of everyday foods in a clinical setting. So it's done very safely, and they're followed up very carefully over a whole year, just to make sure that they're not suffering adverse reactions. So the results aren't published yet. I think they're published in a couple of years, but the sort of early signs are showing that this is really working for some of the children, and it could be just transformational.
Yeah, can we talk to you as well about the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine, Lucy? Because this is a huge story, isn't it? Because they're withdrawing it. It was the vaccine which was used for COVID, and this is after they admitted in court, didn't they, that it can cause or has caused a rare thrombotic side effect.
Thrombocytopenia.
Yeah.
Go on, Lucy.
Well, it sort of quietly disappeared, didn't it, from the market, and not much was said about it. And it has taken quite a lot of fuss and quite a lot of campaigning, really, from victims of this vaccine. And I think at the time there were very fierce questions being asked about the benefits versus the risks to younger populations. And it was particularly in young boys that we were seeing heart problems. And those young boys, many people argued, or young people, were not needing a vaccine at all because their own immune system meant that they could cope with COVID. They weren't at very much risk of dying or getting severely ill from COVID. And the fact that these vaccines they weren't mandated, but we were pretty much locked down unless we were to have one, raised serious questions among some people. So for those victims, it's probably in some ways a good day to see that, this is finally being acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely, Lucy. Except, of course, that the drug companies are immune from any sort of libel claims, and so it is the British taxpayer, despite the fact that these drug companies made billions of dollars of profit during the pandemic. We are going to have to pay the compensation because the government allowed them immunity.
They're saying, AstraZeneca say we're incredibly proud of the role that Vaxzevria played in ending the global pandemic. According to independent estimates, over 6.5 million lives were saved in the first year of use alone. 3 billion doses were supplied globally. However, they've withdrawn it globally, which is a huge step, Lucy, isn't it? A huge step to withdraw it.
Yeah.
Well, there is data, and you can look at data in any way, and they would argue that it did save many lives, and it depends how you read the figures, and that could well be true. But the point is, you do have to prove that you were 60% damaged in order to get compensation, and people say that in itself is quite hard work.
And
so
the 80 people who died,
who knows?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. OK, thank you, Lucy. And the 80 people who died from the AstraZeneca jab, it was the one that was phased out very, very early on for particularly the under-40s because of the bleeding issues. Right, your weather. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Fog and mist should continue to clear through the rest of the day, bringing sunny spells for many of us. However, in the north and west, some rain is likely to arrive across parts of northwest Scotland. That's because weather fronts are still approaching these areas, but elsewhere, high pressure is building in. So that should bring plenty of dry weather and bright weather. The best of the sunshine will be across southeastern areas through this afternoon. There could still be some fog and low cloud lingering across eastern coast close to the North Sea, and we could also see some low cloud across the south coast as well later on today. But in the best of the sunshine, highs are 22, possibly 23 across central areas of England, eastern Wales as well. It will be that much cooler underneath the cloud and rain, though, across parts of the Highlands and the Western Isles, and that rain will likely turn quite persistent overnight and will push elsewhere into many areas of Scotland. We could also see some drizzly rain across parts of the Pennines, some other areas of northern England as well. So a cloudier night for northern areas. In the south, though, it should stay dry and fairly clear, though we could see some mist and fog around, but it's likely to be another fairly mild start to the day on Thursday. And I think Thursday is going to be a warmer day than today. There'll be more in the way of sunshine for a wider area of the UK. Some mist and fog to start. That should clear much more quickly than it has done today. We will see a few more in the way of cloud bubbling up in the afternoon across southern areas. That could allow a shower to develop, but I think most areas should stay dry, and we could see highs of 24 degrees in the sunshine.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
It's Wednesday, that means PMQs. Let's go to Gloria Di Piero and Tom Harwood. They are in our Westminster studio. Good afternoon to you both. And first of all, can I just say what an amazing job you both did on our local election coverage.
Absolutely.
No offence, Tom, but especially you, Gloria, because I don't see you as much. I'm used to Tom being brilliant. But
He wouldn't like that. He wouldn't like that.
No,
But
it is
Bev,
entirely correct.
You were amazing.
You said that.
Encyclopedic knowledge of constituencies, like nobody other.
You did say that to me privately, Bev. It is characteristically generous of you to say it publicly too. Thank you so much. Whatever your PMQ is today, we're going to say it's marvellous. OK, but actually, it's not just about you, this programme. It is the alert for people watching or listening, wherever you are. If you're going to be joining us for PMQs, we want your questions for the Prime Minister or indeed the Leader of the Opposition.
Indeed. Please send in these questions, but also when you send your questions, tell us who you are and where you're from. We're going to put them to our excellent panel here in the studio. So that's gbnews.com/your say to put your questions. After all, PMQs Live is all about you. But Andrew and Bev, briefly, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister?
Shall I go first today?
Yeah.
So I would ask the Prime Minister, how relieved is he that the BBC have now got to handle the immigration issue in a more balanced way, like GB News do?
And I'm going to ask the Prime Minister, or I would ask the Prime Minister, like Donald Trump, has he ever been smacked on the bottom with a magazine bearing his image?
Oh, order!
My goodness, I have to say, I thought I guessed what you two might ask. That was not on my list. But my goodness. Thank you very much, Andrew and Bev. It's fast approaching midday.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel. PMQs Live starts right now. It is 11:58 on Wednesday, the 8th of May. This is PMQs Live on GB News with Tom Harwood and Gloria Di Piero.
In just a moment, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer go head-to-head at Prime Minister